Hello and welcome. I'm Marites Vitug, Editor-at-Large of Rappler, and this is Rappler Talk Investigative. Joining us this afternoon is a lawyer, the President of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, Abdiel Fajardo. Welcome to Rappler. Shall I call you Abdiel? It's a bit complicated with your three names.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Any of the three names you may call me.
Okay.
But Dan is the easiest.
So you're now the president of the IBP, which is the largest organization of lawyers in the Philippines. You were saying earlier about 60,000 lawyers all over the country.
Yes.
In the past, the IBP has not been as engaged. Maybe in the past few years, they have not been as vocal as you are today. So why are you driving the IBP into perilous territory?
Well, I should not say it's perilous. I think we're just bringing back the IBP to its role, really, to be, of course, one of the guardians of the rule of law in the Philippines. So it's a good thing that the current board of governors of the IBP are, I would dare say, are of a similar inclination towards upholding the rule of law.
But is the entire IBP united behind you? Because I understand IBP Davao does not agree with your positions.
Well, that's the beauty of the IBP. We have chapters, no? So that's a total of about 86 chapters in the entire country. And each chapter is also being run by its board of directors. And the direction that they take, they do not come from the national leadership of the IBP. So it's possible, really, that some chapters might not agree with the current direction of the national board with respect to certain pressing national issues.
But But you've set the tone for the IBP. You've taken positions on human rights violations, on the rule of law, on constitutional convention, on the impeachment of process against a Chief Justice.
Yes.
So nobody has spoken up against these positions within the IBP.
Well, I have not personally received any communication or resolution from the other chapters or from the chapters of the IBP explaining their position or making clear their position. So as far as I can tell, personally, there is no such contrary position officially. Yes.
And because of your being so outspoken, you were cursed by our president during the IBP convention in Davao. And yes, maybe you were there on the stage when he said, who is this IBP lawyer who dares tell me not to be onion-skinned?
Well, he did not name me, so, but of course, you can take it from the statements that he was making reference to the statement alluded to the IBP as a result of the ombudsman possibly taking on the issue of the alleged hidden wealth of his family. So yes, I was there. Yes.
How did you feel and about during that moment? And has it discouraged you or not from still speaking up against government?
Well, I'm a litigator, so I'm used to being scolded by judges in court. But it was the first time being cursed openly by no less than the President of the Republic. So it was a new experience. Yes.
But still, after that, we were talking about this earlier. After that curse in person, he still shook your hands before he left the stage.
Yes, yes, yes.
I wonder if he remembered that you were the person who reminded him not to be onion-skinned.
Well, it was a reminder to all government officials, and the President is the highest government official currently. Yes.
As IBP President, you have taken the IBP into a partnership with the Commission on Human Rights.
Yes.
And I understand that your agreement is for IBP lawyers to provide legal assistance to families of victims or witnesses. Can you tell us more about this experience and what the results so far of your partnership have been?
Well, it is a new partnership. So currently we're still in the process of enlisting lawyers to be involved in the defense or prosecution, etc. All the legal work that may be involved in in these cases where human rights are allegedly being violated. Of course, it is always a problem of logistics and, of course, security, because the lawyers are concerned of personal safety also. But we are getting positive results, people say so many things about lawyers, but you will be you will be amazed that there are really, lawyers who take this thing as a cause. Yes.
Like the Commission on Human Rights
Yes.
is doing its own investigations, but they need assistance of lawyers, right?
They are undermanned. They are, the Commission on Human Rights is can only do so much, and if the claim is true that there are indeed thousands of shall we say, murders that are not sanctioned or were not actually in response to a direct threat as claimed, well, then we are looking at 4,000 possible prosecutions.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes.
And I was wondering, how will lawyers like you get information apart from those given by the witnesses? Will you have access to the Philippine National Police in getting all the data you need, or will that be the job of the CHR?
Well, that's the basic problem, actually, because we have a difficulty also sourcing all these official records. In fact, there is now pending in the Supreme Court petition brought by lawyers also. And the last time I heard, the Solicitor General has moved to reconsider his former commitment to submit the documents to the Supreme Court, and is now saying that as a matter of national security, they cannot release the documents. The IBP, on our part, when the Kian de los Santos killing happened, we also requested for documents in relation to the Operation One Time Big Time that was conducted for 3 nights, I think, in a row. So we sent out letters to the PNP leadership and used as basis the constitutional right to information of the people and the IBP's mandate also as the one assisting in the administration of justice in the country and as officers of the court. But we were generally ignored, and we wrote several stations, about 20 of them, requesting for information, and the response was uniform. We cannot submit unless cleared by higher leadership.
So did you go to the higher leadership?
Yes, we did write the chief of the Philippine National Police, but we were not, as far as I know, up to this time, we were not obliged with a response.
So that's going to be a problem in really digging deep into these cases, especially the One Time Big Time was very specific, and you ask very specific number of police stations.
Yes.
So in a way, this Kalida's response to the Supreme Court of not providing the data is similar to the response you got from the stations.
Correct. Because you must realize that if these are indeed legitimate police operations, there must be a record from the very beginning up to the end, up to the actual investigation of, because it's par for the course, it's SOP. But if they cannot produce it, then there must be something wrong.
So maybe you can guide us, lay people. What documents or what is the process, what are the documents we should look for? You were saying from the beginning there should be the name of the person being investigated.
Yes.
It should be in a police blotter, or?
Well, they have spot reports initially.
So we need the spot reports.
We need the spot report, the pre-operation reports. Well, the pre-operation report comes ahead because that is where they detail their supposed operation, their planned operation. And the spot report, of course, when the operation actually happens. And then the report, finally. If there is an arrest, there should be an affidavit of arrest. And if there is a death, there must be so-called investigation and the drug tests, if the allegation is that the drug lord is the killed person was supposedly a drug addict. So
that's a lot of documentation.
Yes, per case.
Per case.
Yes, and if the claim is true that those are legitimate police operations, there should be no trouble producing the case folders.
So I think you know the answer.
Oh,
I mean, why they have not given you this
Well, there is a
documents.
presumption in law that when evidence is suppressed, that is not favorable.
That's very interesting because, of course, you know that the ICC prosecutor is now looking at, is now conducting a preliminary examination, which means basically just going over the information.
Yes.
How
And
can...
they want to know at this point whether they will proceed to a formal investigation. Yes.
So how can the IBP be of help, or do you see any role for the IBP in this preliminary examination? Since you've been dealing with the police, you've been also looking for these documents.
Well, tangentially, of course, the IBP can be of assistance either way to show whether there is cause, or to possibly even clear government of complicity if, as I stated, the PNP cooperates and gives us the documents, because you must see that one of the objections to the jurisdiction of the ICC supposedly is that there is local redress, there is machinery for justice in the Philippines. So if these cases are prosecuted and the guilty are brought to justice and placed behind bars, so that means that there is no need for the ICC to investigate. And if those documents are made available and those documents help clear the police officers involved, then the ICC can say, well, there is a process in the Philippines, and that that process can proceed. We will respect that. But that's the dilemma now of government, because on the one hand, they're saying those are legitimate operations, but on the other hand, they are not releasing the documents. So it's possible that the ICC can see that, well, there must be some systematic, shall we say, effort not to bring to light the circumstances behind the operations.
Because apart from the IBP experience, you were saying that even the Supreme Court asked for these reports and they have not been given.
Yes.
So that's two situations already wherein there you did not get the cooperation of government.
Yes, and that might, compel the ICC to assert jurisdiction.
So, I mean, will the CHR, to your knowledge, because you're working with them, will your cooperation also lead maybe to help or assist the ICC in prosecutor if necessary?
Well, the IBP can only provide the manpower for, because if the CHR is inclined to help in that regard, that will require thousands of affidavits, sworn statements, taped testimonies.
Oh, wow.
So they might come to us for help, manpower-wise, yes.
And on another subject, but related to what's happening in the Philippines, there was a 2018 Rule of Law Global Survey, and you must be aware of this.
Yes.
And the Philippines fell by
18 slots.
Yes, and we're now 88 out of 100 plus countries.
Yes, yes.
So does this alarm the IBP? And what do you think, how maybe in the medium term or long term, can the IBP, strengthen help strengthen the rule of law?
Yes. Well, first thing, lawyers are officers of the court. So we are,
which means
we are essential cogs in the administration of justice and rule of law, of course. So if the field in which we play, which is the field of law, is not healthy, then the lawyers would also be, it's if there are rules, we are bound by rules to play in that legal field, And if those rules are misapplied or they are not applied at all because of a certain imbalance in the balance of power, then the lawyers would have difficulty addressing the justice system. Like, for instance, if a judge is impelled by considerations other than the law and the evidence, what if he's impelled by fear or intimidation? Then the lawyer who is practicing before him is, at a quandary how to win his case. Right? So I saw the World Justice
Index.
Index,
yeah.
yes, and I saw there that the Philippines fell drastically with respect to government checks on government also. That means that when the survey refers to government, they refer to the executive department of government, and the balancing powers as against the executive are the legislature and the judiciary. So it would appear that there is a great imbalance because according to the survey, these two other branches are no longer effective checks on the executive department. The IBP is an outsider.
Yes.
We are non-government. So when all these three government actors effectively collude, because the other two branches can no longer check the executive, all that remains are the non-government actors like the media, civil society,
yes.
and possibly the IBP.
Yeah.
So
that's where your
yes.
role comes in, and that's why
Yeah.
you're
Yes.
very active in speaking up and maybe providing a check.
Yes, because if we are to stick to the rule of law, this balance of power must not be disturbed. Yes.
And as lawyers, we're told, are one of the most conservative.
Yes.
Is one of the most conservative professions in the country. Yet now, you are faced with a situation where there are so many challenges to the rule of law.
Well, I'd like to say that as lawyers, as individual lawyers, we have our personal advocacies. You can choose to defend an accused in a drug case. You can choose not to. You can choose to defend a rape suspect. You can choose not to. That's your personal, professional lookout. But as a bar organization, we cannot advocate something that will distress the rule of law. Yes.
So that's why going to the balance of power,
Yes.
talking about balance of power and the checks on executive.
Yes.
Well, I think one of the areas wherein IBP is active is in the screening of candidates to the judiciary, and so that the quality of the judges and justices is of high standard. So you have an IBP person in the JBC, Judicial and Bar
Yes,
Council.
yes.
But apart from that,
Yes.
how else can you help maybe
Yes. Well,
present better candidates to the judiciary?
Well, that's kind of a problem because we have only one vote in the JBC, and it's a 7-man commission. Well, the candidates are vetted by the IBP. That's why we have
Yes.
surveys also. We have the judicial assessment program. But our feedback there normally just goes to the one vote. So that's a problem. And lawyers are really hesitant to call out publicly on judges who seek higher positions in the Court of Appeals, Sandigan Bayan, and ultimately the Supreme Court. So the lawyers are normally very hesitant to come out publicly and accuse a judge, for instance, of corruption, if that judge is an applicant to a higher position, because he will also practice in that higher position. So we're trying to devise a way by which we can, somehow validate the information anonymously and try to project it to the Judicial and Bar Council. So I guess ultimately, the vote is with the Judicial Bar Council.
And you only have one vote in the JBC.
Yes.
Of course, you know that the President will appoint about 10 more Supreme Court justices. And it's a very crucial time because, as you said, the balance of power again. You know? And I don't know why in the Philippines, or maybe in other countries, the justices appointed to the Supreme Court feel that they owe their appointments to the President. Don't they owe their appointments to their own selves, that they made it, they're qualified?
Well, I will not say that they owe it. I might be held in contempt, but, you know, but that should be the case. Once you get appointed, all the processes prior to the appointment should be forgotten. That should be the idea. That's why, if you look at our judicial ethics, strictly speaking, judges or justices are supposed to live the lives of a hermit.
But that's very difficult.
Yes, unrealistic. But if you can approximate it and, you know, forget alliances, that's the ideal qualification. And many of us, of course, would hesitate to apply for the judiciary because lawyers are very sociable and social persons. So, but the reality is that sometimes, indeed, connections help people get appointed to the judiciary.
What is the perception among you lawyers in the private sector? I mean, is it attractive for you to be, you were saying, you know, it's difficult to join the judiciary because of the nature of the work. But what is the attraction then to join the judiciary, to apply and become a judge?
Well, aside from the fact that they have higher salaries now.
I think that's most important.
That's the most important because actually it should help in their exercise of independence, right? And it should help them, you know, resist temptations. But I think sometimes there are lawyers who are driven to a certain career path. They start with the public attorney's office, and then they transfer to the prosecution with the Department of Justice, and eventually apply for judgeship positions. Very seldom do I see lawyers from the private practice who join the judiciary from the outside coming in. So normally these are career people. But sometimes there are justices like Justice Carpio who apply from the outside, Justice Sereno.
What would be your recommendation if asked about the composition of the Supreme Court? Would you rather that they all be career judges, or would you have a mix of academics, private lawyers?
Yes, a good mix would be lawyers coming from all directions, because sometimes there's also a danger of being so long in the judiciary and you get a certain template in your mind, and your decisions become predictable unless you educate yourself and expose yourself to other ideas. And private practitioners are really well-rounded. So I think a good mix is okay, and the minimum qualifications under the Constitution, under the current Constitution, are sufficient, unless yun nga, the legislature colludes and the judiciary colludes, and that's a problem.
Speaking of collusion, as we speak, you know, the ongoing House Justice Committee impeachment process against the Chief Justice. You know, it's been going on for months, 3 months maybe. And I know that you've spoken up on this, but how do you see this ending? And is this weakening the institution of the judiciary?
Well, as we have said, the IBP has said that impeachment is an extreme process. It's a process of last resort. That is because we want to protect the judiciary, for instance, from pressures from the other branches. Judges and justices are not politicians. No. They are appointed on the basis purely of merit and integrity. So once you apply pressure on them that is outside of that equation, you know, they will tend to also become political. They will try to gather support from from the politicians. No? So, as we said, it is an extreme measure and should be based only on the gravest sins that would amount to a flagrant violations of the Constitution. It should not be exercised, haphazardly and for the smallest of reasons. That's why we have spoken. And so far, I have not seen, in the entire length of the proceedings, no? Except perhaps one weak point where the Supreme Court Chief Justice supposedly did not submit her SAL-N, no, from the time that she was a professor in law school. And if she can provide justifiable excuse for that, on the whole, I don't think there is any shall we call this, basis for that exercise of an extreme power.
So do you think that the judiciary can recover from this shock? I think it's a shock that tends to weaken the institution. In the future, you think that judiciary will recover from this, the use of impeachment as a not as an extreme or last resort, but they just use it like it were an everyday tool.
I hope that the judiciary can recover, but ultimately it's the people who compose the institution, and it's up to the Supreme Court whether it should unite as an institution and rally behind their leader. But as we have seen, even the justices have chosen to testify openly against the Chief Justice.
This is a first, no,
Yes.
in the history of the
Yes.
Philippine judiciary.
Yes.
That colleagues testified against the Chief Justice.
Yes, yes. So that's so unfortunate. To us, it's so unfortunate. Yes.
And maybe just a few more, last two questions. You also spoke up against charter change using the constituent assembly mode.
Yes.
But what we're seeing now is that apparently that will be the mode taken by Congress.
Yes.
Do you see no way of stopping it, or are we going to see the train, cha-cha train, just pass us by?
I hope it's genuine, but the Senate apparently does not want to join a constituent assembly. And absent the Senate, it is highly doubtful that the House of Representatives can do it alone as a constituent assembly, supposedly including the Senate. So I don't think that any con-ass that excludes the Senate would prosper even before the current Supreme Court. But in the event that there is evidence that the House is pursuing that legal reasoning, that because there is nothing in the Constitution that says that voting should be done separately, and that therefore they can proceed even on their own, then I think the IBP should make a stand and clarify and try to clarify before the court whether they should proceed or the COMELEC should be stopped from expending money to run a plebiscite on the question of whether that constitution drafted by a con-ass with only the House participating is a valid expense. Yes.
One last question, Abdiel. You had your House of Delegates convention in January. I understand that you discussed ways by which the IBP can help protect, this time, the marine environment.
Yes.
How did you get there from human rights to to marine environment?
Well, it's fortunate that there are many people helping us in the IBP, and we have several committees also, and we have an international law committee, which is also very active, and I have to acknowledge their efforts also. And they saw the importance of this ruling in the Philippines versus China case, which was handed out in 2016. And we saw that instead of moving the ball forward to a goal, the Philippine government somehow froze the ball, and the ball is now being brought towards the opposite direction. So we thought of ways on how to help or to somehow compel government to take action on this. So the judiciary is a fertile ground because if ever, for instance, in the House of Delegates, we explored the possibility of filing, with the help of the non-government organizations, environmental advocates, filing a petition for the issuance of a writ of kalikasan in the Supreme Court against the contractors or the poachers or the private construction companies who helped build the artificial islands, because they might have been, well, they destroyed the environment in essence because the several coral reefs were destroyed, to lay up a platform for those artificial islands. So if the Supreme Court, for instance, responds favorably, we can say that finally the government, the Philippine government, has taken an official position that would indicate that it is not waiving, the favorable decision of the arbitral tribunal. So that is the intention. And of course, the other case is that when the government personnel in charge of protecting the environment are being slapped with harassment actions in order for them to effectively be barred from performing their functions, the IBP is willing to help them respond to those harassment actions.
The first type of case that you may file has to do with companies that were involved in destroying or...
Yes, because...
But these are Chinese companies, aren't they?
Yes, but...
they fall within the
Philippine courts can exercise jurisdiction if they do acts or certain acts within Philippine... that encroach upon Philippine
That will be
rights.
an interesting case.
Yes, because the Constitution provides that protection of the marine environment is a duty of the state, is a positive duty on the part of the state.
For example, it's very clear in Mischief Reef, which is within the EEZ, and they have built artificial islands there. So will you use Mischief Reef as the first
I think there are 7 islands. And,
yes. You'll do all in one case.
It's possible. We're talking with we are in the process of formulating our strategy with the NGOs involved in maritime protection.
Oh, this will be very interesting. And do you think this will be out within the year?
We hope so, because as you can see, recent photos have shown that they have practically finished with the air bases in those islands.
Yes. Okay, so even if they're foreign companies, as long as they operated within the jurisdiction of the Philippines, then it falls under
the Supreme Court.
Court.
Well, we hope that the courts will see the wisdom behind this and see and assume jurisdiction over these foreign companies and poachers who thrive on the illegal fishing within our EEZ.
You'll have a lot on your hands. You also have to watch Benham Rise.
That's another story.
That's 13 million hectares. And also there's apparently it needs to be watched now more than ever also because the Chinese have named some features already.
Yes, of course.
But I know that you cannot spread yourself too
Well, I'm thankful
thinly.
to the delegates who actually proposed these resolutions from the floor. So you can see it's not me. Actually,
at least
there is a big body of lawyers who want to do this.
That's good news for us who are skeptical about lawyers.
Yes, thank you very much.
No, on that note, on a positive note, that you have lawyers who have brought up the idea of moving forward the Philippine victory in The Hague. That's positive to hear. And I said earlier, maybe I take it back. You're not as conservative a profession at all. And also thank you for sharing us your views on the impeachment going on, especially now the human rights violations and how to shore up the rule of law in this country. Thank you, Abdiel.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, our viewers, for listening in.